Every time she rammed her Mercedes straight through my gate, she acted like nothing happened. I was bleeding money on repairs while she buried me in fake violations, trying to force my family out of the home I built with my own hands. But what she didn't know is I don't stay down. And when I struck back, it went viral. My name's Roy Henderson, and I'm 52 years old. I've lived in Pine Valley for the last 15 years, long enough to know every street corner, every crack in the pavement, and just about every neighbor who's come and gone. Back when this place was nothing but open farmland and pipe dreams, I was the one building half the homes here, laying foundations, framing walls, and making sure families had roofs over their heads. These days I keep it simple. Deck repairs, foundation fixes, smaller projects that don't break my back but still keep food on the table. After 3 decades of construction, I've learned to respect the small details, because when you miss them, things fall apart. My wife Susan jokes that I know every building code in the county better than the officials themselves, and she's probably right. That's the life of a contractor. Measure twice, cut once, and always pay attention. But nothing in those code books could prepare me for Karen. She's the so-called HOA president here in Pine Valley, a woman in her mid-40s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a rehearsed smile that looks more at home in a real estate office than anywhere else, and a habit of driving her shiny white Mercedes where it absolutely doesn't belong, straight through my gate. That gate wasn't just some flimsy decoration. I built it myself, anchored the posts 3 feet deep in concrete, cedar beams solid enough to keep out anyone who had no business coming down my private road. And private means private. No easements, no public right-of-way, no legal grounds for any HOA jurisdiction. Still, Karen treated my land like her personal shortcut, smashing through with her car like she was teaching me some twisted lesson. The first time, I thought maybe it was an accident. The second time, I started doubting my sanity. But when she came back again and again, casually destroying what I built, and then had the nerve to file fake violations against me, that's when I knew this wasn't an accident. This was war. I remember one afternoon standing there picking up splinters of my shattered cedar beams, still clutching a chunk of ruined wood in my hand, when I heard tires on gravel. That same white Mercedes rolled slowly back down my road, like a predator circling to check on its prey. My jaw tightened. The window came down, and there she was, Karen, smiling like we were just neighbors catching up in a grocery store aisle. "Hi there," she chirped. "I'm Karen, HOA president for Pine Valley. We need to talk about this gate situation." I blinked at her in disbelief. Gate situation? She had just destroyed my gate. I told her flat out, "Lady, this is private property. Check your deed maps. There's no emergency access, no easement, no right-of-way. You don't have any authority here." But Karen just waved her hand, dismissing me like I was fussing over spilled milk. "Oh, that old thing was a safety hazard anyway. Community emergency access. You understand? We can't have residents blocking essential services." Right then, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. This wasn't ignorance. It was arrogance. She wasn't asking. She was telling. And the way she said she'd be filing paperwork to have my gate removed permanently, that wasn't some neighborly concern. That was strategy. But what I didn't realize then was that Karen wasn't acting alone, and her plan went way deeper than a busted gate. I figured calling the sheriff would be straightforward. Property damage, trespassing, maybe reckless driving. Nothing complicated. Sheriff Brooks showed up about an hour later. Decent guy, I'd seen him around town meetings. But the second he looked at the wreckage, I noticed something was off. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He shifted his weight like a school kid caught stealing candy. "Well, Roy," he muttered, "this looks more like a civil matter to me. Property disputes, HOA issues. Maybe you two can work it out. Somebody had just smashed a vehicle through my gate on purpose, and he wanted me to shake hands and make peace? It didn't add up. He sounded like a man reading lines from a script he didn't believe in. His tone was hollow, forced, and everything about his body language screamed that he was stuck in something bigger than he wanted to admit. That's when my neighbor, Mike, wandered over. Mike's a retired vet, spends most of his days tinkering with engines in his garage, and somehow manages to know everyone's business without making it feel nosy. He took one look at the wreckage, whistled low, and asked, "Karen strike again?" The word again hit me like a hammer. "You know who did this?" I asked. Mike nodded grimly. "White Mercedes, right? That's Karen. She's been testing boundaries all over the neighborhood. Word is she's got some big development deal brewing that requires road access. And your gate, well, it's in the way." I glanced at Sheriff Brooks. He was still staring at the gravel like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. "Family complications," Mike added quietly. I frowned. "Family complications?" Mike just gave a knowing look, and Brooks muttered something about being short-staffed before heading back to his cruiser. "We'll keep an eye on it," he said. Translation? Don't call me again. That's when it hit me. The sheriff wasn't just lazy. He was compromised, and the reason why would change everything. After Brooks left, Mike stayed behind to help me stack the broken lumber. While we worked, he suggested something that turned out to be the smartest move I'd make. "Roy, you might want to get yourself a security camera. Something tells me this isn't over." He was right. Karen wasn't some random neighbor having a bad day. This was calculated, purposeful, like the opening move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The next morning, I installed a cheap security camera I picked up at the hardware store. Motion-activated, decent night vision, good enough to catch license plates. While I was drilling the mount in place, Mike strolled up with his coffee mug and leaned against the fence post like it was his personal bar stool. "Roy," he said, "about yesterday's little sheriff situation." I paused mid-drill. "What about it?" Mike sighed. The kind of sigh you only hear before bad news. Brooks isn't just turning a blind eye because he's lazy. He married Karen's sister last year. That makes her his sister-in-law. He's stuck between his badge and Sunday dinner. Family first. Law second. I froze, staring at him. The sheriff of this county is family with the woman who just drove her car through my gate. Mike nodded. That's why he looked like his boots were on fire yesterday. He knows if he pushes back, Thanksgiving turns into a war zone. Karen knows it too. And she's smart enough to use it. My stomach turned. Suddenly, Brooks's strange behavior made sense. Karen had a shield, a uniformed one. That's when I realized I wasn't just up against Karen. I was up against a system she controlled, and she was only getting started. The morning after I mounted that little security camera, I thought I'd finally caught my breath. It wasn't much, just a basic model from the hardware store, but it gave me peace of mind. I figured if Karen tried her demolition derby act again, I'd have proof. I wasn't even done tightening the last screw when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not Karen this time, a county truck. My gut tightened. Out stepped a building inspector with a clipboard tucked under his arm like it was a weapon. "Mr. Henderson?" he asked, already flipping through papers. "That's me," I said slowly. "We've had an anonymous complaint about potential code violations on this property." I laughed bitterly. "Anonymous, huh? Let me guess, my gate isn't up to regulation anymore?" The inspector didn't crack a smile. He just started marching around my yard like he owned the place, measuring here, crouching there, jotting notes. He poked at my deck, checked my shed, even scribbled about my perfectly legal burn pile. An hour later, he stood up looking smug. "Your permit documentation appears insufficient," he announced. "You'll need to provide certified copies of all original permits from the county clerk within 30 days or face citation." Penalty $800. I nearly choked. I'd had those permits signed and filed for 15 years. My copies were right there in my office. But now, suddenly, they weren't good enough. I stared at the notice in my hand, feeling heat crawl up my neck. This wasn't just random bureaucracy. This was targeted harassment in official ink. That's when I understood. Karen wasn't going to hit me with her car again, not yet. She was going to hit me where it hurt worse, through paper, fees, and deadlines. I thought Karen's Mercedes was the weapon. I was wrong. Her real weapon was paperwork. That afternoon, I drove down to the county clerk's office. A squat brick building that smelled of mildew and burnt coffee. I waited in line for 40 minutes, only to be told by a tired clerk that retrieving my original records would take 4 to 6 weeks. My deadline, 30 days. I leaned on the counter, trying to keep my temper in check. You're telling me the county can't meet its own deadline? She adjusted her glasses and lowered her voice. Look, you might want to talk to the Harris family. They went through the same thing, thousands of dollars in fees. They fought until they couldn't anymore. That name stuck with me. Harris. I tracked them down that night, got Richard Harris on the phone. His voice was weary, hollow, like someone who'd been carrying weight too heavy for too long. Same playbook, he told me. Anonymous complaints, impossible deadlines, constant fees. Every time we proved one violation wrong, 2 more popped up. Inspector, fire marshal, health department, you name it. All roads led back to Karen. We finally sold our place, $30,000 under market. You know who listed it? Karen's agency. The house was on the market the day we left. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. So that was her game. Break families down with harassment until they fold. Then swoop in, list the property, and pocket the profit. And now? I was next on her list. That realization changed everything. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a blueprint of destruction, and Karen had been running it for years. That night, I pulled out a notebook and labeled it Survival File. Page 1 had today's date. From now on, every document, every phone call, every strange look from a neighbor would go in it. Sure enough, the very next morning, Karen's white Mercedes crawled by slowly, her phone raised, recording my property like she was some investigator. My new camera blinked red, recording her right back. It was war, only she thought she was the only one documenting it. Later that week, Mike came to my kitchen with a grin and a digital recorder in hand. Roy, you're gonna want to hear this. He hit play and Karen's voice filled the room. Just say you're concerned about neighborhood safety. Don't mention the development project. Keep it focused on how his behavior makes you feel unsafe. Mrs. Patterson's nervous reply followed. But Karen, he's never been aggressive. He carried my groceries last week. Karen's voice turned ice cold. That doesn't matter. What matters is creating a pattern of community concern. Stick to the script. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. Proof. She wasn't just harassing me. She was coaching others to lie. Karen didn't just control paperwork. She controlled people, and she turned my neighbors into weapons. By the time the HOA flyer showed up under my door, special meeting to address community safety concerns, I knew it was a setup. Still, I went. Better to face her lies than let her own the room unopposed. The Pine Valley Community Center was packed. Karen stood at the front like a prosecutor, charts and blown-up photos behind her. Tools left outside, lumber piles, even a picture of me hauling trash bags. To her, these were signs of instability. To anyone else, it was just life. Neighbors I'd known for years took the mic one by one, reading their coached lines. Mrs. Patterson claimed she felt unsafe. The Johnsons, who'd moved to Florida months ago, somehow testified about loud noises at all hours. Every word landed like a stone in my gut. Karen had been planting seeds for months and now she was harvesting, but I wasn't entirely alone. I caught glances, some neighbors shifting uncomfortably, lips pressed tight. And in the back row, Mike with his phone recording every word. When it was finally my turn, I stood up. My voice was steady, but inside I was burning. Folks, I've lived here 15 years. Built half these homes, carried your groceries, fixed your fences, lent tools whenever you asked. Does that sound like someone unstable, or does it sound like someone being targeted? Silence, heavy, uncomfortable silence. Karen just smiled wider, thanked me politely, and moved on as if I hadn't spoken. The meeting ended with whispers and side glances. I walked home through the cool night air, feeling like a stranger in my own neighborhood. The next morning, Susan opened her laptop to find a storm of one-star reviews for my contracting business. Detailed, polished lies about projects I'd never touched. By lunch, one of my long-term clients canceled, apologizing but saying, "Neighbors are talking. We can't risk it." By the end of the day, I'd lost $1,500 a month in steady income. Susan sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes full of worry. "Roy," she whispered, "she's not just going after the property. She's trying to destroy us." I nodded slowly, the calm of cold determination setting in. I'd poured concrete for 30 years, built structures meant to withstand hurricanes. And now, I realized, Karen wasn't just playing HOA president. She was playing tyrant. This wasn't a neighborly dispute anymore. It was survival. And survival meant fighting back on her level, but smarter. It starts with the obvious, a car smashing through a gate. That moment is loud, simple, and impossible to ignore. But what made it dangerous wasn't just the dented wood or the cost of repairs. It was the message behind the smash, a public, deliberate act meant to tell me, "You're removable." When Karen rolled up in her white Mercedes and drove through my cedar gate, she treated it like a routine. She smiled, waved away my protests, and promised to file the right paperwork. That smile wasn't friendly. It was a guarantee. The local sheriff shows up, but his answers are soft and unhelpful. "This looks like a civil matter." And he leaves. Later I learn why. He's tied to Karen by family, so the badge that should protect me has been dulled by relatives. That's the first angle of the attack. Make the damage public, then quietly ensure official protection for the attacker. The physical assault becomes a demonstration of raw power, not only to me but to anyone watching. It said, "Stand down or be next." When your protector turns into your excuse, you realize the fight isn't just against one person. It's against the wheels they grease. The second wave is paperwork. Within a day, inspectors appear with clipboards and rules. An anonymous complaint triggers an official visit. Suddenly, long-standing permits I've had for 15 years are insufficient. I'm given 30 days to produce certified originals or face fines. Penalty, $800. The county clerk says originals take 4 to 6 weeks to retrieve, plus a $200 processing fee. The math is simple. Make deadlines impossible to meet, then cite noncompliance. This step is clever and cold. It doesn't require violence. It uses the slow teeth of bureaucracy to gnaw at a person's finances and time. It makes normal life into a legal maze. Phone calls become evidence. Paper becomes pressure. The goal is to create a small, steady drain. Fees, delays, and frustration until the target gives up or sells. When I call victims from the past like Richard Harris, I learn this is a pattern. They face the same impossible deadlines, the same anonymous complaints, and the same inspectors who seemed eager to find faults. In Richard's case, they ended up selling $30,000 under market. Who listed the house the day they left? Karen's agency. That's the playbook. Manufacture problems, harvest the sale. The third wave hits the social fabric. Karen doesn't only use forms and inspectors. She uses people. She coaches testimony. She shapes narratives. I find a recording where she tells a neighbor, "Stick to the script. Say you're worried about safety. Don't mention the development." That one recorded line changes everything. It proves the complaints are staged, not organic. At the HOA meeting, neighbors recite their lines. Mrs. Patterson cries about feeling unsafe. People I've known for years suddenly echo claims that don't ring true. The room that used to be a place for community talk turns into a courtroom where I'm the accused. That social isolation does more damage than a fine. It eats reputation, and reputation is currency in a small town. Then the online attacks begin. One-star reviews for my contracting business, polished lies about work I never did. Within days, longtime clients cancel contracts. By noon, I've lost $4,500 a month. The assault on my reputation becomes an assault on our livelihood. Susan's bookkeeping clients begin receiving whispers about irregularities. Her business that took 20 years to build starts to wobble. This is how the attack ramps up, from timber to testimony to total economic pressure. When a community that once leaned on you becomes the source of your ruin, you learn how thin trust can be. After reputation and clients, the strike moves to institutional money. My insurance company calls about community safety complaints. The licensing board sends a letter opening an investigation into alleged unsafe practices and falsified permits. The bank asks questions about neighborhood safety and threatens to review the mortgage if issues aren't resolved. In 48 hours, the paperwork, rumors, and investigations manage to wipe out roughly 70% of my recurring monthly income. This step is surgical. It hits recurring lines on a ledger: insurance premiums, licensing, mortgage security. It's a multiplayer attack. Anonymous complaints spark official letters, which trigger insurers, which spook banks and mortgage officers. The result is cascading. Lose insurance, risk losing loans. Lose license, lose clients, lose income. Everything is connected, and the attacker only needs to push one place to make the rest collapse. Then, the anonymous email chain lands in my inbox. It contains a forwarded correspondence between Karen and a man named Tom Davidson. The subject line reads like a hook: Curiosity 1. The content is worse. It spells motive in plain numbers. Commission structure remains at $200,000 upon successful completion of neighbor buyouts. The message mentions access through my property as the critical piece to unlock the entire development. Suddenly, what had felt like random cruelty becomes crystal clear. Karen wasn't protecting safety. She was engineering sales. This is where the pressure becomes physical again, but with a public twist. Karen stages a public spectacle, a convoy, her white Mercedes at the front, Tom Davidson's luxury BMW behind, a Channel 7 news van trailing, even Sheriff Brooks in his patrol car. They come to demonstrate community resolution. They expect me to fold. They expect a headline. This is the moment she plans to make her power absolute, publicly. But by now, I've changed the rules. I built more than a gate. I built a test. Under the cedar, there's 3 ft of reinforced concrete and steel rebar, anchored deep into bedrock, designed to stop 4,000 pounds of German engineering dead in its tracks. I did the boring, patient work at night, made it look ordinary to avoid suspicion, and let the facade do its job until the moment of truth. I sit on the porch and watch as the Mercedes lines up and charges. The impact is loud and clean. The car's hood crushes, the radiator bursts, airbags explode, but my posts don't budge. The gate doesn't shake. The shock travels through the crowd like lightning. Media that planned to film my surrender end up broadcasting her ruin. The scene flips in real time. A staged victory becomes viral humiliation. That crash is the turning point. It's the physical culmination of the bureaucratic and social siege, but it backfires spectacularly. Instead of breaking me, Karen breaks her own machine. Her car becomes evidence. The news captures the humiliation. The files and recordings prove the conspiracy and the hidden motive. The $200,000 commission plan comes into the light. When a bully stages a parade and physics returns the favor, the whole town finally sees the score. For weeks I thought I understood the game. Karen wanted my land, her sister's husband, the sheriff, looked the other way, and the county's inspectors played along with every anonymous complaint. It was harassment, yes, but I believed it was personal. She didn't like me, didn't like my gate, and didn't like anyone who stood up to her authority. But then Tuesday morning came, and with it, an email that split my world wide open. I was at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee, still smelling of cedar and cement dust from the gate repairs I'd finished the night before. My inbox pinged. The subject line read, "You need to see this." No sender name. Just a burner account. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The message was short. Forwarded for your safety. Read carefully. Attached was a chain of correspondence between Karen and a man named Tom Davidson. The first line, I read, made my stomach drop. The land assembly project requires access through the Henderson property as discussed. Commission structure remains at $200,000 upon successful completion of neighbor buyouts. Timeline is critical. We need clear road access by month's end or the whole deal collapses. $200,000. That was the number. That was what my property, my sanity, my marriage, and my livelihood were worth to them. Karen hadn't been acting like a neighborhood watchdog. She'd been acting like a broker with a jackpot on the line. My family wasn't collateral damage. We were the main obstacle. Scrolling further, I found Karen's replies. They were cold, precise, and horrifying in their confidence. Don't worry about the old man. I've perfected the pressure points: financial bleeding, community isolation, regulatory harassment. He'll crack within the month like all the others. Like all the others. That phrase froze me. Suddenly, the families who had quietly left, the for sale signs that had popped up after months of whispered disputes, it all made sense. Harris, the Johnsons, the Lees, they weren't unlucky. They hadn't left by choice. They'd been driven out, one by one, using the same blueprint that was now aimed squarely at me. That's when I realized Karen's harassment wasn't personal, it was professional. I wasn't her first victim. I was just the last domino she needed to knock down. The email continued, attaching glossy development plans, multi-unit complexes, cul-de-sacs, projected profits in the millions. The drawings showed wide access roads that didn't exist. Unless my driveway was bulldozed into one, Karen didn't hate me. She didn't even care about me. She cared about that payday. For the first time since the nightmare began, I understood the stakes in numbers. $200,000 to Karen, millions to developers, and nothing but eviction papers and financial ruin for us. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. My wife Susan walked in, saw the expression on my face, and asked, "Roy, what is it?" I turned the laptop toward her. She read in silence, her face going pale. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "She's not just after us. She's after everyone." The revelation hit like a second impact, harder than any Mercedes against a cedar gate. Every move Karen had made was suddenly illuminated in the cruel light of strategy. The smashed gate? Not reckless. It was the opening shot, meant to provoke. The inspectors? Not random. They were pawns, sent in sequence to bleed me dry. The neighbors' testimonies? Not concerned citizens. They were coached actors in her play. The one-star reviews? Not coincidence. They were tools to collapse my income, to force me into desperation. Each tactic wasn't isolated. It was a checklist. And Karen had perfected it over years. The moment I saw the pattern, I knew I wasn't living in a feud. I was living in someone else's business plan. The anonymous sender had included more than emails. There were property surveys, timelines, and even preliminary commission breakdowns. Karen wasn't improvising. She was orchestrating a machine, and suddenly every loss I'd taken wasn't just a loss. It was evidence. Susan stood by the counter, her hands gripping a coffee mug so tightly I thought it might break. "Roy, this is bigger than us. If she's done this to others, then she's a criminal." I nodded slowly. "And if she thinks paperwork and whispers are enough to break me, she picked the wrong man. I've been building things too long to not see weak points when they're right in front of me." That was the truth. Karen's strength was her system. But the bigger a system is, the more weak points it has. And now I had her weak points in writing. That night, I spread everything out across the dining room table. Violation notices, inspector reports, canceled contracts, screenshots of reviews, the sheriff's in action, and now this email chain. The pattern stared back at me like blueprints. Blueprints of harassment, blueprints of conspiracy, blueprints of leverage. For the first time, I felt a shift in the balance. Karen thought she was tightening the noose, but really, she was giving me the rope I needed to tie her down. Just when I thought the twist couldn't deepen, it did. The crash of Karen's Mercedes into my reinforced gate had already drawn attention. Neighbors, cameras, even a local news crew. The story of the HOA president who destroyed her car trying to bully a homeowner was spreading fast. That's when a man in a business suit approached me, calm and professional, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment. "Mr. Henderson," he said, offering a firm handshake. "My name's David. and I think it's time Aunt Karen learned about consequences. Aunt Karen. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable once he said it. The jawline, the sharp eyes, though his carried something different. Not cold calculation like hers, but patient satisfaction. He pulled a business card from his pocket. Attorney at law, licensed in 3 states, specializing in property rights and bureaucratic abuse cases. David wasn't just any lawyer. He was family. And he wasn't here to save Karen. He was here to dismantle her. He explained in a low voice that 5 years earlier, Karen had destroyed his life too. During their grandmother's estate settlement, he had questioned her ethics. She retaliated by spreading lies about embezzlement and misconduct. Those lies cost him his job, his fiancée, and his standing in the legal community. But instead of collapsing, he'd spent 3 years quietly building a case, documenting every email, every phone call, every victim. And he had been the one behind that. Anonymous email. The enemy I thought I faced alone had already made enemies inside her own family, and one of them had been building the perfect case for years. David laid it out. He had folders full of evidence, financial records tying Karen's agency to every forced sale, emails with Davidson detailing the $200,000 commission promise, and testimonies from families she had crushed. My survival file, his legal arsenal, it all fit together like beams and joints in a frame. That night, David and I sat in my kitchen until dawn, cross-referencing every piece of evidence. My notes filled the gaps in his legal framework. His files turned my frustrations into formal charges. Together, we built the skeleton of what would become a case too solid for even Karen's arrogance to knock down. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something new. Not just determination, not just anger. I felt momentum. The revelation wasn't just that Karen was greedy or that she had power. It was that her greed left fingerprints. Her arrogance left cracks. And her own family, her own blood, was willing to help expose them. She thought I was just a stubborn old contractor clinging to my property. She thought Susan was just a bookkeeper. She thought Mike was just a nosy neighbor. She thought David was a casualty she'd buried years ago. But all of us together? That was more than she could handle. The twist wasn't just the emails. It wasn't just the $200,000 price tag. It wasn't just the revelation that I wasn't her first victim. The real twist was this. Karen had spent years perfecting her system of pressure, but she had never faced someone patient enough to document it, stubborn enough to resist it, and lucky enough to find an ally with both the skills and the motive to bring her entire empire down. And now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting to her game. I was preparing to end it. The morning was crisp, the kind where the air feels sharp enough to cut. I sat on the porch with Susan, sipping coffee, staring at the cedar facade of my reinforced gate. To any neighbor, it looked ordinary. But I knew what hid inside. Steel rebar, concrete sunk 3 feet deep, anchored straight into bedrock. It wasn't just a gate anymore. It was truth disguised as wood. When Karen's convoy appeared, it looked like a victory parade. Her spotless white Mercedes led the line. Tom Davidson's BMW followed, a Channel 7 news van pulled up behind, and even Sheriff Brooks trailed at the back like a man dragged into church against his will. Karen stepped out of her car first, smiling like a politician on election night. She shook hands with Davidson, waved at the reporter, and acted like she already owned the place. The reporter rehearsed her lines about HOA leadership resolving community disputes. Karen basked in it. Then she climbed back into her car, adjusted her mirror, set her jaw, and hit the gas. The Mercedes roared forward, building speed, 25 mph of German arrogance aimed straight at my cedar boards. Neighbors crowded the sidewalks, cameras out, whispers flying. Everyone expected the gate to splinter again, but not this time. The impact echoed like thunder. The Mercedes folded like a soda can under a boot. Hood crumpled, radiator exploded, airbags deployed. White smoke hissed into the air while the crowd gasped. Karen stumbled out, coated in airbag dust, looking like she'd lost a pillow fight. My gate? Not a scratch, in that single moment. Pine Valley learned what Karen never understood. Physics doesn't negotiate. The Channel 7 crew captured every second in crystal clear HD. The story they thought would show Karen's triumph had become her public humiliation. Instead of a conquering president, she looked like a reckless bully who had destroyed her own car. Tom Davidson's face turned red with fury. He stormed toward her, yelling loud enough for every microphone to catch. "Karen, you guaranteed this. You told me Henderson was selling. You said this was a formality." His words cut deeper than the crash. He wasn't just angry, he was betrayed. The neighbors laughed, whispered, pointed. Mike sipped from his coffee mug like he was at a comedy show. Even Mrs. Patterson, who'd once testified she felt unsafe around me, stood frozen with guilt written all over her face. Karen's empire had cracked in one spectacular collision. As the tow truck hauled away what was left of Karen's $60,000 Mercedes, another figure stepped forward from the crowd. David, the lawyer, the nephew, the one Karen thought she'd buried years ago. Dressed in a sharp suit, he looked like he'd been waiting for this exact stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, "I think it's time Pine Valley saw the truth." He pulled out a banker's box filled with files, each folder labeled with names and dates. He laid them across a folding table inside the packed community center later that evening. Neighbors filled every seat. Some stood against the walls. The Channel 7 crew was there, cameras still rolling. David began to read. Emails between Karen and Tom Davidson outlining harassment strategies. Financial records showing her real estate agency pocketing commissions from every forced sale. Testimonies from families who'd been driven out. Richard Harris's retirement stolen. The Johnsons forced to move. The Lees bankrupted by fees. It wasn't a smear campaign. It was a criminal conspiracy mapped out in black and white. Sheriff Brooks, red-faced and sweating, stood in the back. For once, he didn't say a word. A state trooper had been called in to review the files, and within 20 minutes, the trooper spoke the words everyone wanted to hear. "Karen, you're under arrest for conspiracy, abuse of authority, and systematic harassment." The handcuffs clicked. The Miranda rights echoed, and for the first time, the crowd didn't whisper, they cheered. The woman who once ruled Pine Valley with fake violations and threats was now just another criminal in handcuffs. Karen's real estate license was suspended within 48 hours. Tom Davidson's company severed ties, demanding repayment of advanced fees. Neighbors who once nodded politely at her now crossed the street to avoid her. The empire she'd built on fear and intimidation collapsed overnight. The footage of her crash went viral, 20 million views in the first week. Memes flooded the internet. HOA president versus physics. Karen meets concrete, $200,000 mistake. News anchors laughed as they replayed the clip, framing it as the ultimate example of arrogance meeting preparation. Karen had wanted fame. She got it, but not the kind she could ever recover from. The legal system didn't take long. Faced with David's airtight evidence, Karen pled guilty. The judge sentenced her to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and full financial restitution to every family she had destroyed. To pay it off, she was forced to sell her own home. The same house she'd once used as her throne was stripped away, sold off to cover debts. She went from Pine Valley power broker to an unemployed renter in less than 6 months. Her bankruptcy filing laid it all bare. Every penny of commission she had stolen, every fee she had manipulated, every false violation she had leveraged, all of it had to be paid back. Neighbors who once feared her now pitied her. Some mocked her. Most just ignored her. The woman who controlled meetings, silenced opposition, and dictated lives was reduced to applying for minimum wage jobs. Employers Googled her name, saw the viral crash video, and tossed her applications aside. In the end, Karen wasn't feared, respected, or even hated. She was irrelevant. Her punishment wasn't just legal, It was permanent exile from the power she craved. For me, Susan and Mike, the moment of justice wasn't just watching Karen in handcuffs or seeing her Mercedes crushed against an unmovable gate. It was the quiet after the storm, the knowledge that the harassment was over, the neighbors were free, and the blueprint Karen had perfected had finally been destroyed. Every family she had hurt received restitution. The Harris family bought a retirement home in Florida. The Johnsons rebuilt, the Lees recovered, and Pine Valley itself transformed. The HOA rewrote its rules, transparent, fair, with oversight that made another Karen impossible. As for us, our mornings went back to coffee and garden talk, not violation notices. Susan's business flourished, stronger than ever. My gate still stood straight and unyielding, with a small bronze plaque Susan installed at the base. Private property. Engineering triumph. 2024, simple, honest, permanent. Karen wanted control. She got consequences. She wanted victory. She got viral humiliation. She wanted $200,000. She got bankruptcy. That's justice. That's karma. And for once Pine Valley could breathe. 6 months later, Pine Valley didn't look anything like the battlefield it had been. The whispers, the violation notices, the fake reviews, they were gone. What replaced them was something simpler, something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Susan and I sat on our porch every morning, coffee steaming in our hands, watching the sun rise over the gate. That gate, the one Karen had tried to smash into oblivion, still stood firm. Cedar on the outside, steel and concrete within. It looked ordinary to passers-by, but to us it was a monument. Not to anger, not to revenge, but to survival. Susan had polished a small bronze plaque and mounted it at the base. Private property, engineering triumph. 2024, every time I looked at it, I remembered that sometimes patience, preparation, and persistence are stronger than intimidation. That plaque wasn't just metal. It was a reminder of everything we endured and everything we won. Neighbors stop by more often now, not to gossip or complain, but to talk, share, even apologize. Mrs. Patterson came with tears in her eyes, confessing how Karen had coached her, how guilty she felt for repeating words that weren't hers. Mike, ever the loyal ally, joked that the gate had given him more entertainment than his TV. Families that had been divided rediscovered the joy of community. Pine Valley wasn't broken anymore. It was healing. Karen's punishment had been swift and decisive. Her probation and community service stripped away the arrogance she once wore like perfume. Her financial restitution went directly to the families she had ruined. The Harris family finally bought their retirement home in Florida, free from the harassment that had stolen their last years here. The Johnsons rebuilt their savings. The Lees, once buried under legal fees, slowly climbed back into stability, and David, the lawyer who had once been her victim, turned his personal battle into a mission. With his evidence, his reputation not only recovered, it flourished. He opened a practice specializing in property rights and HOA abuse. Within a year, he had represented dozens of families across 3 states, helping them stand against the same tactics Karen had used. He called it his real work, and for him, justice was no longer just about winning cases. It was about preventing stories like mine from ever repeating. Karen thought she was unstoppable. Instead, she created the very force that dismantled her empire. Susan's bookkeeping business bounced back stronger than ever. Clients who had doubted her returned with apologies and referrals. Her waiting list grew long enough that she had to hire help. Watching her smile again, hearing her laugh without fear, that was the real victory for me. As for me, I kept working in construction, but with a new twist. Word spread fast that I had turned my gate into an immovable fortress. Before long, homeowners started calling, not for decks or fences, but for consultation. They wanted their own defenses against harassment, against intimidation, against trespassers who thought they could bully their way in. I never advertised it, but somehow people found me, and I realized something simple. There's a market for resilience. Even better, my evenings were mine again. No violation letters on the kitchen table, No inspectors at the door, no anonymous emails. Just Susan and me, building the life we always wanted. The HOA itself changed forever. After Karen's arrest, the community voted in new leadership. Meetings were recorded and published online. Violations required third-party verification. Financial accounts were monitored by independent auditors. No more anonymous complaints. No more fabricated emergencies. The bylaws were rewritten to protect individual property rights. Residents now had an appeals process, cooling-off periods, and safeguards that made it impossible for one person to seize power again. For the first time in years, Pine Valley became what it was meant to be, a neighborhood, not a dictatorship. Property values rose, not because of Karen's schemes, but because buyers saw fairness, transparency, and trust. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about construction or law or even patience. It was about truth. Karen thought she could twist it, bury it, and weaponize it. She thought she could turn lies into leverage. But the thing about truth is, it always leaves traces. Her arrogance left cracks. Her greed left fingerprints. And those cracks and fingerprints were all it took to bring her down. What destroyed Karen wasn't my gate. It wasn't even the legal system. It was her own overconfidence. She built her empire on lies, but forgot that lies can't carry weight forever. They always collapse under their own pressure. When the crash came, it wasn't just steel meeting Mercedes. It was arrogance meeting preparation. It was intimidation meeting resilience. It was lies meeting evidence, and it was Karen meeting karma. David once told me something I'll never forget. Karen isn't unique. There are Karens in every county, every HOA, every boardroom. But so are there people like you, ordinary folks who refuse to fold. He was right. My story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for thousands of others. For every family bullied by an HOA president, for every homeowner harassed into selling, for every neighbor silenced by lies. This story showed what happens when you document, prepare, and refuse to bow. That's why I decided to share it here. Not because I enjoy reliving the nightmare, but because maybe, just maybe, it will give someone else the strength to fight back. If one stubborn contractor with a notebook and a reinforced gate can topple a bully, imagine what happens when more of us stop folding. Now, when I walk past that bronze plaque on the gate, I don't see wood and steel. I see proof. Proof that bullies don't always win. Proof that patience beats pressure. Proof that when you prepare, you can outlast anyone's scheme. Karen thought she could erase me. She thought she could erase Susan. She thought she could erase our home. But today, Karen's house belongs to a young couple with a baby on the way. They waved to us the other morning as they walked past, smiling at the gate that stopped a tyrant. They probably don't know the full story. Maybe they never will. And honestly, that's fine, because peace doesn't need a headline. In the end, the best revenge isn't anger. It's a life so strong, the bully becomes nothing but a footnote. And that's why I'm telling you this story, because there are more Karens out there. More neighborhoods under siege, more families on the edge of losing everything. If this story made you clench your fists, if it made you smile when justice finally hit back, or if it reminded you of a fight you've had in your own community, don't just walk away. Subscribe to HOA Truth Tales so you don't miss the next story of ordinary people standing up against extraordinary abuse. Share this video with a neighbor or a friend, because the more people who know these tactics, the harder it becomes for bullies to use them. Comment below with your own HOA nightmares or the moment you finally pushed back. We read every single one, and your story might be the next one we tell, because at the end of the day, this isn't just my story. It's ours, and the only way bullies win is if we stay silent. So let's make some noise. Karen thought she could bulldoze through my life like she bulldozed through my gate. But she forgot one thing. Some of us don't break. Some of us build back stronger.